It's back, people. It's back. Hex Legend of the Towers is back open at Alton Towers, and I have to say I wasn't expecting it to open this year. It all went very quiet after the quick update, but it's back. So, we've seen a lot of reviews online. Some of them seem more bitter than productive, and some of them seem to highlight quite a few good points. However, we've got to ride it for ourselves, and we will give you our honest review in this video. But first things first, we need to go ride it. So this is the first area you'll see change, because there is now a door here going into the first room, which there was never. This was all very open with a counter on the top, so you could see how many people were going through. This has now been completely facing out with a door. There's Hex Legend of the Towers. We've been in now, so join me. I'm going to take a seat and I'm going to take you through what I feel about it. If you enjoy the video, please drop it a like. It means the world to us. It's free. It helps us massively on YouTube. Let's get into our review. There we go. We've had quite a few rides on Hex Legend of the Towers. And as I said, it is really good to see it back. It's different. It is definitely different, which is good to see. There are some noticeable changes. There are some less subtle changes. There are obviously some minor negative points, and there are some real positive points. So let's start positive, why not? One, it's back open. It's been a long time, and I'm not going to defend how long that ride's been closed for. I don't think it was ever needed. I think obviously they were at a conundrum point as to what to do with the ride, and it took quite a long time to make the decision before getting hold of a coma and indeed getting it back up and running. But it's running well. In terms of the actual ride itself, it definitely feels a bit better. It's parking a lot better, something I looked at. Whilst not as good as I'd say the original days where it kind of stopped on the dot, it's definitely a lot better. Don't think the cycle's particularly any different though, to be honest with you, but it feels good. Everything seems to be working inside. But of course, it is a experience ride. It's not a ride, if that sort of makes sense. The ride part of it is fantastic to have back, on the fact that, I've ridden it quite a few times today, and every time there's always someone with their mouth wide open as to what's going on. And that for me is the beauty of Hex, one of the best things about it. I think a lot of the negativity that I've seen and read, it kind of gets lost in what the story actually is. The story is, obviously he meets the witch and she puts a curse, and he chains the oak because he doesn't want a branch to fall, and then a branch falls. So the actual story is him taking the branch down to his laboratory and doing wacky experiments on it. I think it's important to remember that, because I think it's often forgotten, particularly when we talk about lighting and things. So let's walk you through the attraction. As you walk through the hall part, which we did get some footage of for you, the mood lighting is really, really nice. It's like blue lighting. Not a lot has changed in there. What changes is when you get to the end. There is a new fascia with new doors. So it used to go sort of a lovely metal railing. It used to count you in, and you could see the actual the first show. We'll call it the first of 3 shows. You could see that from the queue lines. It did kind of ruin it when you got in there. You weren't really paying attention to the Earl of Shrewsbury and his story so much. Where now you do, because the door closes behind you, and that's your focal point. The lighting in there is slightly different, not massively, I wouldn't say. The main house lights turn off in order for you to focus on the Earl, so your eyes are driven to what they need to be driven to. It's as simple as that. From there, you open up and go into the first pre-show room. One thing you'll notice is the floor's been done. It's been painted a lovely red colour. It blends in quite nicely. The first room, again, is all about lighting, and the sound does sound better as well. I think they have digitalised the sound. It sounds better throughout the attraction without me going over it too much, and it's definitely louder in the main chamber itself. So yeah, the first show is obviously the story, if you will, done by the projector. Not a lot seems to have changed there. I think there's a lot of white dressing that's around the attraction that's fairly new, but it is the lighting. The lighting in there, again, is quite subtle. They've got LED lights, blue LED lights, which come on when the lightning comes on. And where they've also got lights behind the screens as well, which kind of light up as to what's going on the screen. So for instance, when the tree gets hit by lightning, there's a bit of fire, it goes red behind there, which makes sense. And indeed when he's testing as well at his laboratory at the end. So yeah, really happy with that scene. Think it's really quite something. You then walk through to the next room, which is where you kind of meet the witch. That's the best way of me describing the room. You've got the 4 TV screens, you've got the generator, and it's all sort of put together. Again, it's lighting in here that's changed. It's not just lighting that's changed, actually. It's also the TVs that changed. So I don't know if people remember, sort of 7-8 years ago, it had a mini closure for a bit, and they cleaned it up and actually replaced the TV screens in that room with LEDs. Or LCDs, I'm going to say LCDs actually, given the quality of them, and it didn't work. They were really, really bright, and the feedback immediately was on that, and I actually swapped them with the ones in the queue line, which were old CRTs, square ones effectively, and put them in there. Well, they've been changed back again. Obviously, they were kind of beyond what they needed to do to bring the ride up to date. But we'll get to that shortly. The generator has been changed. It's much bigger now. It's big and red, and you get a spark effect which comes out of it, where beforehand you had a spark effect internally. Now you have a massive spark that comes out of it. The story's the same. The effects are roughly the same as well, with the lighting obviously being upgraded to LED, and the wind effects and everything. It's all very much the same. You then go behind the curtain, which is automatic, and you walk down to the actual ride chamber itself. Once you get on there, you will notice it's brighter. It is brighter, 100%. But things are highlighted that perhaps you might not have seen before. That's all I'll say on it. It's quite well highlighted. I think initially when you sit down, actually, the lights are quite good. The ride starts, the tree has like a fibre optic effect. That's probably the best way of me describing it. And obviously some of the lights that hadn't worked for a while have been upgraded. So the tubes which come down to go into the tree have been upgraded. They've got lovely blue kind of lights on there. And you've got lights on the ceiling as well, which have been there before but are considerably brighter now that they're LEDs. There are a couple of weird lights. We'll call them a couple of weird lights which kind of shine as lightning across. Now for me, most of the lighting in there I think is absolutely fine, and this is where I go back to the story. The story isn't you're in a dark forest at this point. The story is you're in the laboratory, and the laboratory is never pictured to be dark at all. In the video it's not dark. It's very well lit. There's a lot of experiments going on. There's a lot of flashing lights. There's a lot of sparks. There's a lot of everything going on in there. So actually, for me, it kind of makes sense. The only one that doesn't make sense for me is at the end of the ride, where you are effectively upside down, even though you're not upside down, and the demon lights come on at the top. They now don't come on in sections. They come on all 4 at once, which doesn't make sense to me. And then you get this horrible, like, white light, like a snowy light, which goes across. Makes no sense to me whatsoever, with some red flashing lights as well. They're just not needed. The eyes were enough, and the eyes going 2 and 2 were absolutely perfect. Other than that, controversially, I wouldn't change any of the lighting in there. So let's start with the positives. It is much, much cleaner in there in terms of the design, the layout, and everything like that. I'll start with some of the negatives I've seen, and I'll turn them into a positive, unbelievably, which is not like me to do. The middle scene, the second to last scene, well, the last pre-show scene, we'll call it, with the sparks. Now, I think beforehand, the generator actually sparks when it was coming back on. However, the generator now sparks when it's broken, effectively. So everyone's like, the sparks don't make sense, but actually, they do make sense because it's the generator breaking down. You know, the generator ultimately is pitched as what is giving power to that room. Because everyone's like, I don't understand why the generator's there. It's quite loud, in fairness. You can hear the speaker for it. But it does actually work because it's giving the power to the area. And, you know, it's pitched that the generator goes out and the lightning comes down, the witch appears, and then the generator comes back on. So the actual spark that everyone talks about is when the generator blows up, effectively. So it kind of makes sense. Although the generator does come back on, it kind of makes sense. Where beforehand, it sparks coming back on, which actually, in hindsight, didn't really make sense, to be honest with you. And then the lighting throughout the rest of the ride is fine. The lighting in the second pre-show, where you're actually watching the video, I think is absolutely fine. The lighting in the Earl of Shrewsbury bit, at the entrance bit, is absolutely fine. I've got no issue with the lighting at all going through the ride part. As we said on the chamber, again, for the most of it, I don't have an issue with the lighting in it. It's not, you know, everyone's like it should be dark and mysterious, but why should it be? Laboratories aren't dark and mysterious, they're quite opposite. And actually, when you watch the video, it's not pitched as dark and mysterious. So it kind of makes sense in what they've done. It works really well. I think it's just the additional lights. The lightning lights are okay, but when they switch to the white lights on the ceiling at the end, that is the piece I would change. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. But positive wise, that's where we are. Actually, I think it's really good. Now, negative-wise, there are a couple of bits. As we said, the lighting at the end, for me, it's not a ride killer, but it could be better, undoubtedly. I'm going to pick up on different things to what I've seen people pick up. The TV screens are right up there as a major bugbear for me in killing the moment. Even in the walking through the hall, which is the first part, you know, the old video is a 4x3 square. Effectively, it's a square one. It wasn't widescreen. So why have we not dressed the TVs square? So there's not a massive light patch either side of them. You know, they've dressed the TVs in white cloth around, but why have we not dressed them square? It makes much more sense. And that is a really quick fix as well. Really quick fix in there. You know, must be 6-7 TVs. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, redress them, would look absolutely fine, even if you cut off a bit of the screen to make it look like it was coming through. This then extends now to the final pre-show, which has the same problem it had when they changed the screens first time, and that is, it's too bright when the lights go out. All 4 screens are really bright. I would argue they're quite cheap screens. I've worked in electrical sales and retail and things. I would argue they're quite cheap screens. Again, they're in 4x3, which doesn't help. But, you know, there's various ways you can get around this. Now, oddly enough, I'll show it now. The actual outside screens, which are called outdoor screens, have much better blacks. I'd be using them inside. Might not look very nice initially. They would need to be dressed, but they'd need to be looked. I would be using those inside for better blacks, undoubtedly. And again, the TVs have been dressed around the TV, forgetting that it's a 4x3 image and it's square. So it just makes no sense whatsoever in what they've done there. It's a relatively quick fix if they just redress the screens or put a surrounding around them. It's not if they want to change the screens. The alternative is obviously the big cloak at the end behind the bookcase is automatic. So there's no reason why the TVs can't have been a bit better enclosed and had an automatic cloth come from them, a blackout cloth, basically lift up as the show starts and then lift back down as the lights go off. So there are options there, and it does ruin the experience in there for me. None of the lights do, and none of the new effects do. It's the TV screens. A major bugbear of mine is the floor. It's a lovely painted red. It's so lazy that we don't scrape off the chewing gum first, and we paint over chewing gum. It really winds me up. There's just no need for it. You know, the ride's been shut 19 months. Get a steam cleaner in there, get the chewing gum off the floor, paint the floor. That won't be fixed now. That's not a quick fix because the floor's been painted. But that's just a bugbear of mine. And then in the final chamber, I wouldn't change anything apart from the ending. I get the lighting, I get the brightness, you know, it's appealing to all audiences whilst actually keeping the continuity of the story, which perhaps it wasn't doing before. But the lighting at the end is OTT and not needed, and the lights all coming on at once make no sense when they're eyes. You know, this monster doesn't have 4 eyes, it never has done. So that's the changes. One more thing I noticed in the chamber as well, there is rope on the side. You obviously got the sides. And where it swings left to right, I think it used to be pinned down or didn't used to be there. It never used to swing. It ruins the illusion that you're not going upside down. If it's pinned, you wouldn't have that illusion. But where it's swinging side to side, you know, for an eagle-eye viewer like me, I'm like, well, you're not going upside down, are you? Because it's only swinging side to side and not going upside down. So there are a lot of quick fixes for me, which I'd like to see them implement. Whether they do or not is obviously, you know, people are giving feedback on the lighting being too bright. I'm going to disagree. Giving feedback on really silly things, which actually I don't think kill the story and actually are better for the story than before. But Hex, Legend of the Towers, that's my view on it. It might not be the most popular view, but that's my view on it. I think it's a massive step in the right direction, a few tweaks, and it's back again. But leave your comments, please. Leave your comments. What do you think of Hex, Legend of the Towers?